It's been over 20 long years since Rare and THQ brought Conker's binge drinking and frying pan bashing antics to our Nintendo 64s, since officially being introduced to gamers in 1997 and making his first in-game appearance in Diddy Kong Racing as a playable character of that game's cast. Conker would eventually claw his way all the way to the upper echelon of memorable platforming characters of the 90s. After many gravitated to him in Diddy Kong Racing, it quickly became clear that Conker would not only fit nicely into his own game, which was already in development, but that he had the potential to be much more than just another 3D platformer. As many gamers today well know, Conker went on to garner the affections of many for his crude humor, suggestive themes, and fresh take on the 3D platformer tropes that countless games of the era had imitated by that point. Considering that the Conker series only includes a few actual games and just a handful of other appearances here and there, Conker has accumulated a rather abnormally large and durable cult following fanbase. So then why have we only seen so much of him over the last 2 decades? Why would a character with so much promise be relegated to so few games and so far apart? What the hell happened to Conker? The story of Conker could have easily been much different. As the first major game was being developed, it was actually shaping up to be far more family-friendly than the Conker we know and love today. Originally, Rare wanted to fit him into the same space as Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. This could have been fine, but also potentially could have been disastrous for the game, since Mario 64, Banjo, and countless other similar games already existed, and more were sure to follow well into the next decade. If Conker was going to stay the course with that tone and aim at that same audience, the competition would ultimately prove to be far more difficult to compare to. Sure, Rare knew that they had a good game on their hands, but with all of the other options out there, who was to say that Conker would be a success or even make much of a splash at all in a genre that already had so many excellent characters and flavors? A change had to be made, and the decision was made to turn Conker's quest into an edgier, dirtier, more mature game, which would eventually be called Conker's Bad Fur Day and be pushed back well over a year for the developer to have time to implement the massive overhaul to what they had. This change wouldn't hamper the development of the Game Boy Color game though, and the follow-up Conker's Pocket Tales would find itself filling in as the role of the character's solo debut, which was perhaps not the best first impression for the character to make. Pocket Tales was an okay game as far as Game Boy Color goes, but it would lack the new style and direction of Bad Fur Day, thus sort of putting it in that mid-tier of its genre. Thankfully, Bad Fur Day wasn't far behind, and all of the delays and changes would prove to be worth it, as the game would receive some of the best feedback of any game on the Nintendo 64. Not only praised for its solid gameplay, which was expected of Rare games at that point, Bad Fur Day was celebrated for many graphical effects like fully animated mouth and body movements, excellent lighting and shadow effects, as well as the outstanding music, hilarious dark humor, and over-the-top personality. Sales would also show the fruits of Rare's decision to aim at a slightly older audience, with not only college kids and high schoolers picking up the game, but also the same younger players that they were originally going for, also showing interest. Conker's Bad Fur Day to this day lives on in infamy as a very unlikely success for the normally family-friendly platform due to the choices made in shaping that first home console release. Miraculously, Rare was able to hang on to the rights to Conker well beyond the heyday of the Nintendo 64 and release a much beefier version of Bad Fur Day on the original Xbox with lots of additional content and a fresh coat of paint, and the game was only really held back in the eyes of longtime fans by a little bit of censorship. Interestingly, some of the more crude moments of the original that somehow made it onto the Nintendo 64 were not getting past Microsoft, which to this day is a little bit of a head scratcher. Nonetheless, Conker Live and Reloaded was received favorably for its extensively updated visuals, which still look fantastic today, improved audio quality of the original voice recordings, and robust online multiplayer modes, which stayed fairly active well after the launch of the Xbox 360. Rare largely played it smart by improving what Bad Fur Day needed improved and leaving alone what it didn't. And Reloaded remains the preferred version of the game for many, while even purists who do prefer the original still have a favorable opinion of it. This would prove to be the end of the road for full-fledged official Conker games, unfortunately. But that's not for trying on the part of former and present game developers. Between Young Conker, a horribly received HoloLens game that dropped Conker into an augmented reality game for seemingly no real purpose, purpose other than to sell headsets, and Project Spark, which was a game maker type game for the Xbox One and Windows PC that gave owners of the game small snippets of a new Conker game while nudging them to also make their own. Conker has had a rough go of it since the glory days of Bad Fur Day and Live and Reloaded. While the Conker game within Project Spark seemed to have the right idea, it just didn't come together for most fans. It lacked polish, depth, and did little more than conjure nostalgic feelings from Conker fans for the 40 minutes or so before it ended. Shockingly, no real major sequel to Bad Fur Day has made it to store shelves to this day, and Conker fans still only have a Game Boy game and 2 versions of the same classic to choose from if they want a real Conker experience. Perhaps the closest we've ever gotten was Conker Gettin' Medieval, which was only shown to the world after its cancellation, but looked fairly interesting as an online spin-off with a focus on shooting and team-based competition. Due to undisclosed reasons, this game was canceled and the team decided to move on to other things. Perhaps it was the influence from the Microsoft acquisition of Rare that ultimately led to the lack of emphasis on the franchise, but there is no solid proof of that. All we really have is the timeline of Rare that does seem to show a shift in priorities around that time. Whatever the reason is, anybody with even a smidgen of business sense should be able to see the potential in the franchise, and it would be a very bad bet to assume we'll never see a true sequel to the original. It's likely a matter of when, not if, given that the fanbase is still just as big as it's ever been, and interest is still just as palpable. I wouldn't count this squirrel out just yet. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to ensure you'll be notified when new videos go up.